Hey y'all, welcome to the Charlotte Mason Show. I'm host Dollie Freeman. I'm excited to have you here today as we're going to be talking about something that is going to make a difference in how you feel about your Charlotte Mason homeschool. As you're coming in, I would love for you to come on in and actually introduce yourself, as this is an interactive show. And I would love to get to know who's watching and from where. Give me a second. So say hello and tell me how long you've been homeschooling. I love to know where exactly my homeschooler mamas are in the transition of going from regular homeschooling into the Charlotte Mason way, or maybe perhaps you're actually starting out with Charlotte Mason from the very beginning. And if that's the case, I would like to celebrate you. Also, let me know if you're watching from Facebook or from YouTube. That will help me to know where exactly you're coming in from and to make sure that I can see comments on both ends. Last week, my live was not showing on Facebook Live. It was only streaming on YouTube. So today I can tell I'm streaming on both, but I always love to have the confirmation from those who are watching. So say hello. Let me know you're there. We have a really good topic today that I think is going to really open up your mind to what Charlotte Mason says when she says living, but we're going to do it in a way that will have you understanding a little bit better. So let's move on with today's topic so that you can understand what it is that we're going to be doing today. Today's show is on the topic of what does twaddle mean. It's not very often that you don't hear about the word twaddle when you're inside the Charlotte Mason realm of homeschooling. And twaddle is something that really is something you really should understand. It comes up, it plays a big part in our culture today, unfortunately, and it's something that you as a Charlotte Mason mama must safeguard. Hello, Elizabeth, glad you're here from Texas. You've been homeschooling since 2002 and have graduated 2 students so far. Awesome. We've graduated 2 and we're on our 3rd this year, so that's exciting. Vanessa, welcome. You've been homeschooling for 3 and your oldest is in 1st grade. Feels much more than the previous years. Glad to see that you're on YouTube. And Caitlin, thank you for letting me know we're streaming live on Facebook. That is definitely what I was looking for, to know that we're live over there as well. So you're new to Charlotte Mason, learning and loving it so far. Well, this is going to be a topic that is going to help you to truly understand what it is and how to go about it. So I'm really excited about today's topic. All right, let's get started. Let me get this going. So first, before we start this entire conversation about what twaddle means, I want you to really know what the definition of twaddle is. So twaddle means trivial or foolish speech or writing, nonsense. So as we're going through the different parts, the facts that you're going to be learning today about twaddle, I want you to be having that nonsense in your mind. I want you to be thinking about the trivial or foolish speech and writing. It's going to play a big part in how you're actually coming into this for your homeschooling experience. So let me get to the next one. This is always fun to see how things go. All right, so fact number 1, twaddle can be part of both written and literature. So what you're going to see is you have to understand that, just like the definition, it could be both speech and writing. So you have to have that part of your head. Many times I'm hearing the word twaddle used with books. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and kick that to the side and let you realize that it's both in speech and in text. So you want to be watching for this in your homeschooling, and I'll let you know exactly what to be looking for. All right, and then the next part, I want you to understand that living produces ideas, but twaddle is living as well because it produces the foolish and nonsense ideas instead of wholesome ideas. And this is what I want you guys to really be making the difference. Most time, people come into the Charlotte Mason world and they assume that twaddle is the opposite of living. I know that was the case for me. But the truth is that when you completely understand that living is both in text and in speech, as well as the influence of others in our life from whatever we're watching, doing, observing, that type of thing, that you will understand that living is actually the same as twaddle. It's just the two different results. One gives wholesome, the other actually gives nonsense. And so you want to be thinking about those two things. Our children are sponges. Our children are sponges. We're sponges. Everything that we consume, whether it be through speech or through writing, actually produces ideas in our mind. And that's what we want to be thinking about. What are those ideas that are leading into action producing? Is it wholesome action, or are they foolish and nonsense actions? This will give you an idea of how much is in your children's lives and yours, if it's truly living or if it's the living is twaddle. So I hope that is kind of making it a little clear for you. And this is a long quote of Charlotte Mason. It's really long, but there's a lot of things in it. I've highlighted a key aspect to you, but I want you to understand what Charlotte Mason says. I'm going to try to read it from this screen. But poor children, they're too often badly used by their best friends in the matter of knowledge offered them. I've got to go for this one. My contacts are not seeing it. Grown-up people who are not mothers talk and think far more childish than the child does in their efforts to approach his mind. If a child talk twaddle, it is because his elders are in the habit of talking twaddle to him. Leave him to himself, and his remarks are wise and sensible so far as his small experiences guide him. Mothers seldom talk down to their children. They are too intimidated with the little people and have therefore too much respect for them. But professional teachers, whether the writers of books or the givers of lessons, are too apt to present a single grain of pure knowledge in a whole gallon of talk, imposing upon the child the labor of discerning the grain and of extracting it from the worthless flood. So this is a lot of words, but I want to share it with you because I want you to understand what Charlotte Mason is saying about how twaddle is very much a part of a child's life. And we as adults are considered their best friends, right? Children look up to adults. They often want to emulate adults. They want to mimic their actions, their verbs, their vocabulary, those types of things. So you have to understand that children are highly influenced by the adults in their life, not just their mothers, but every adult in their life. So in knowing that, Charlotte Mason is saying, is your children are speaking twaddle, nonsense, right? If they're speaking nonsense, that means there's nonsense in their life. And that if they're left to their own, we as moms know, we sit back sometimes and we think, where did that come from? That is way beyond their years. And that is because when a child is left to themselves with the right things in front of them, the right influences, both in written and in oral literature, they are going to produce a wholesome ideas. It's going to really connect with their brain, and they're going to be showing it through what they say. This is the effect of having a living education alive in your home. However, the opposite is true. If we allow too much twaddle in our home, our children's talks are going to be like that. So the bottom part of this quote, Charlotte Mason talks about not just our conversations, but the professionals who are teaching our children, right? That they're often watering down, for a better word, the lessons. They're making them adapt to having either so much information where the grain or the idea, Charlotte Mason refers to his ideas as grains of knowledge, they're hard for the child to pick out because there's so much going on. There's so much words and not enough focus on the ideas that a child is often left to their own to try to figure out that one little small grain and extracting it from a worthless amount of words. So this is very important to how we come across and what we present to our children. And we have to understand that it's words and in writing, okay? Charlotte Mason calls them oral and written. So before we move on to fact number 2, let's talk a little bit about your thoughts on fact 1. Fact 1 is something that for us as homeschooling Charlotte Masoners from 1999 has given me the ability to understand that Twaddle is a very big part of our life if we're not intentional about our choices and the influences that we allow our children to have. We must be very, very intentional about the influences of the people, the things they're reading, the things they're watching, as well as what we're saying around them and how we're saying it. We want to encourage our children to be better than what most of our society think they can be, but we also want to avoid having a flood of words coming out where we're expecting to speak tons to our children and not allow them to have the ability to pull something out on their own, okay? So this is what is so important to the first fact of making sure that we as mothers are doing all that we can to recognize, number one, the influences that our children have and the twaddle that may be present in their life. All right, I'm going to move on to fact number 2. Fact number 2, twaddle creates mediocre effort like that. I'm sorry, let me repeat that. Fact number 2, twaddle creates mediocre effort that produces a dislike of learning. Now, if you've been homeschooling for a while, your children most likely will be disliking learning if there's a lot of twaddle in their life, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I want you to stop and think about the efforts your children put forth in their education, as well as what you put forth in your learning efforts, right? What is there? Is there a dislike or is there a love of learning? And of course, when we have living with the right influences that produce wholesome, we are going to produce the love of learning. But when we have too much twaddle in our children's lives, in their influence, in their books, in what they're hearing, what they're watching, you understand that that's going to it's going to produce the dislike of learning. So if you're struggling right now, if your children are really struggling, it's all going to be stemmed back to twaddle. So I want you to sit and think. I hear this all the time. My child is balking at all my homeschool assignments. Our children are hating homeschool. Our children, it's like pulling my hair out of the head trying to get our children to just do their lessons. If that is the case, if this sounds like your home right now, it's an indication of twaddle in their life. So it's a really good way of being able to put a pulse on the living in the home, if it's wholesome or if it's nonsense, and be able to say, okay, this is the problem that we're having. My children is disliking school, is disliking learning because there's too much twaddle, all right? So this is a perfect indicator of what that looks like for you in your home. So let's go to Charlotte Mason. This one's a little bigger. I think I should be able to read it here. And I see an issue, but that's okay. All right. It is inadvisable to put twaddling, goody-goody storybooks in the hands of the young people. A revulsion of taste will come, and then the weakness of this sort of literature will be laid to the charge of religion. I want you to totally hear what Charlotte Mason says. It is inadvisable. She means do not do this. Make sure that you stay away from this as much as you can to provide the goody-goody storybooks in the hands of things that make children go, ooh, and get all excited about in the hands of young people. And the reason is if you do that, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be a revulsion. I always have a problem with certain words. There's going to be a revulsion of taste that will come. And that revulsion is like they're going to have a taste for the goody-goody, and they're not going to have the taste for the wholesome. And the goody-goody is another word or another description of twaddle. It's going to change the sort of literature they're going to be attracted to, and it's going to lay a charge of religion, which that means is that is exactly what they're going to do. They're going to be faithful in what they believe, the goody-goody, and you're going to really struggle to get into the wholesome. Now, that's not to say it's not possible to change their taste. It just means you're going to have to become even harder at fighting the intentions of yourself and your children, but it's doable. But it's so much easier when you lay down those rails of picking the wholesome things for your children and being intentional about the type of living that you're putting in front of your children. So let's talk about this before we move on to fact number 3. Let's see what it is that you are learning about this and having some questions about. So here is a question from Elizabeth. Would you recommend small amounts of twaddle for a struggling reader? My 14-year-old right-brained dyslexic seemed to be helped by I Can Read Barbie and Disney books. Okay, so I expected this question, and it's a good question. So let me address the question about, or not really address the question, but distinguish between learning to read and the ability to read and what we put in front of our children. You have to understand that there is a period of time in which a child must learn the mechanics of reading. The mechanics of reading includes being able to sound out the phonics, be able to put the words together, and to be able to read and grow with multiphonics, right? Multiphonograms. So then they're going from simple words to more complex words to be able to have the knowledge to break up the bigger words. So here's the danger of bringing in too many twaddle, as you're saying, too many twaddle books during the mechanics of reading. There is a gray area in which we tend to stay longer and into those easy to consume books at the library. I've been there myself, trust me, I have been there, so I know what I'm talking about, into the realm of teaching your children how to actually create that desire for wholesome things, right? Not the goody-goody. So what you're wanting to do is you want to find those wholesome books that are at the lower level. So you want to make sure that you're doing all that you can, and that's a really good investment for you to do. I think it's on the Charlotte Mason Way website that I have some books for early reading that have more of that wholesome in there versus the twaddle. You want to make sure that you're getting your children moving towards those books. Now, what's important to understand is Charlotte Mason doesn't require children to read too much on their own. During this learning of mechanics of reading, parent is also reading some of their curriculum. So the more you can put in front of your children, the better it will be for them moving forward, because then they get the best vocabulary, they get the best stories, they get really good, hearty things for them to be learning the skill of reading. So for us, I like to use old books like Mother Goose, really easy reading that they can actually go through and build on. Aesop's Fables is another good book. And they have some that have really beautiful illustrations in it as well. Being able to just get your child to be okay with bigger books, but smaller sections. You're still doing those small, short lessons. You're still moving them along. You're still helping them in that process. Okay, so what I want you to really do is focus on putting those better things in them, in front of them, even though they're still learning the mechanics of reading. So trying to pull as much of those out as you can is better for them. And so for a 14-year-old, the Help Me Read Barbie and Disney books would be better fit of finding some good literature that has easier words to read, that is engaging stories that would build. Stories like Stuart Little, Charlotte's Web, the classics, right? And then just because there is a lot of those words inside there, and then you sit beside them while they're reading and you give them the multiphonograms, helping them remember. Like, I'm still doing this with my 10-year-old. When he comes across a word he doesn't know and he's struggling to sound it out, I will say to him, AI says, and then he needs to say A. And I'm helping him pull it apart. Sometimes he doesn't see the IGH. IGH is 3-letter, and he says I. And then we move away from that. And little by little, to the point where we don't say it verbally, he'll just say three-letter I says I, and then the next thing he's like, that's I, and then he sounds it out, and then he no longer does it because he does it mentally. And that is the progression you want to be making with your children, especially at 14-year-old. They need to get that wholesome desire in, and the accomplishment of reading a bigger book at a slower pace. All right, let's move on to fact number 3. Children are capable of far more than we give them credit to do. This is something that I have learned in my own experience as a homeschooling mama, with teaching dyslexic children, as well as having children who tend to be a little lazier in their motivation. They don't want to work as hard as others. This is something that we need to bring into our homeschooling to understand that in most of the areas that we are requiring things from our children, they can do far more than we actually give them credit to be doing. And that by us coming into this situation of, addressing Twaddle, becoming intentional about getting it out of their life, as well as making sure that we're bringing in as much wholesome as we can do, that we have to do as Charlotte Mason says, and that is to require more of them. So I remember years back when I was trying to get my son over the dyslexic challenges, I decided I was going to require far more than I ever have and see where he can do. And you know what? He finished all of those books. It was becoming more diligent, intentional about what he read, and being there and becoming very faithful and consistent in what we're doing. That next thing you know, his skill of reading became better because he was then become challenged. He was then in front of a lot more challenging words, and the repetition of seeing those multiphonograms actually helped his brain retain them faster. So he learned to read far, far better because he had more things put in front of him that was delighting his mind and encouraging that natural drive to learn it better because he wanted to do more. So this is something that you want to consider as you're trying to get that twaddle out of your children's life. What I found is that in teaching 20 years with our children is that, and I've been intentional about the living aspect of our home, that children prefer unabridged over abridged versions of books. They prefer deep conversations. They like difficult questions, and they enjoy challenging obstacles to overcome. And if you don't realize that, start thinking about your children. Think about how they like to try to climb a tree. That's challenging to them. They like to see if there's a great big mound of snow. They like to see who can get to the top first. If they see a child who is swimming faster than they can, they want to see how much they can learn in swimming skills to be able to swim faster than them. They love challenges. We as human beings thrive on trying to improve. It's naturally ingrained in us. Years ago, quite a many years ago, probably 18 years ago, I had explained to our children the difference between unabridged and abridged version because my daughter had read it. Why does it say abridged? What does abridged mean? And so I explained to her that abridged means that some of the story has been taken out to make it easier for the person to read it and make the book smaller. And both of our children were like, at the time we only had 2, both of our children were like, I would never want to read only half of the story. I would never want to not have the whole story. And so back then we decided early on, we were always going to have the unabridged, the full story. In fact, after they read a book and they watch a movie, they do not like having some of the story taken out. They prefer it along with the book. So the deep conversations, they happen all the time. We want to make our children's brain expand with wholesomeness rather than making it easy, right? And nonsense and twaddle. So the more you see these expansions of the deep conversations, the love of a full story, the difficult questions that they're asking because ideas are being formed in their mind and they don't quite know how to get from one point to the next in their mind. So they have these difficult questions they're asking. Be excited and celebrate those because they're so important to how you as a mom can just flourish with that living environment in your home while removing and becoming intentional about keeping the twaddle at bay. So here's a wonderful quote from Charlotte Mason that I absolutely love, because it just encourages us about how important it is to become intentional about what we're putting in front of our children. They must grow up with the best. There must never be a period in their lives when they are allowed to read or listen to twaddle or reading made easy. There is never a time when they are unequal to worthy thoughts, well put, inspiring tales, well told. This should be our driving compass, so to speak, of being able to, in a world where twaddle is so easily accessible, both in books, in what we watch, what we talk about, what we hear, that we need to be very intentional about those wholesome things that we're putting in front of our children, that we're making sure that we understand that they're unequal to worthy thoughts, that what we put in front of us should be just as worthy as what we're putting in front of our children, and that we should never be worrying about abridged because we are afraid our children cannot do. They can do more than we give them credit for. So having an abridged version of the Pilgrim's Progress is never what we should be doing. We should be giving our children the unabridged. And if it's overwhelming to you, give them the audiobook that's dramatized. My children love that dramatized. And just realize that our children actually can and will absorb this information if we give it to them. So if your children are struggling with reading and they're still learning the mechanics of reading, put some money and effort into finding some really good books that have more of the easier vocabulary in it so that they can learn how to read through. And what you're going to find is, it's going to start out slow, but it's going to speed up. This is what I've been seeing with my son. We started doing when he was 8. I really invested in some really good books that are easy to read, wholesome books. And he would just keep rereading the same books to build his speed. And then we've moved in last year, we moved in some really good books for him as well. And this year he is doing phenomenal. He's not, doing wonderful, but he's doing phenomenal in his skills of being able to recognize those multiphonograms better and be able to get through. So I'm not helping him as much as I was last year. And that's what you want to see, the progression. And so he's on target that at some point in his 5th grade, that he should be able to read most of the books, if not all of his books, on his own. So this is a very exciting time when you put the effort and energy into becoming intentional about removing this twaddle and making sure there's living in part of that. So before concluding today's show, let's get into the comments and see what I can do to help where you're at. Vanessa, I'm always appalled when I accidentally pick up an unabridged book. Yes. So a funny story is I never have had my children read the Three Musketeers. Well, my son, my senior, is loving French. He is very interested in the French culture and swords and all that. I thought this would be the perfect book. He would really delight in reading this book. So I got the unabridged, did not pay attention. Almost 800 pages. And so, he really asked, can I not read that? It was overwhelming to him. And you know what? Our children can do far more than we give them credit to. I believe that. I know Charlotte Mason's true in everything that she says. And so I'm like, I know this is going to be a delight to him. He just needs to get past the book. So instead of giving him the one term I expected to give him, I gave him 2 or 3 terms. He finished it in just over 2 terms. He had like 6 weeks left in his book, and he finished it and he loved it. He could not stop reading it. He would sit and read and read and read this book. Our children can do far more than we expect them to. It's when you raise them with the unabridged, they truly want the whole story. And so this weekend, we're going to be watching the Three Musketeers movie together. So he's real excited about that. And he literally said, I'm going to be so disappointed if they don't follow the book. They're not going to follow the book, I'm pretty sure. But he will let us know all the way through that they did follow the book. So the purpose in the unabridged, making sure your children know that an unabridged is the full story. When they realize that it's a full story and that you want to give them the gift of knowing the whole story, they're going to want the unabridged. They're not going to want the abridged themselves. And then you just know it's going to take them a little bit longer to get through. And if it takes a child a full year to read 100 pages of a wholesome book, then you let them have that accomplishment. And I guarantee you, if it's a subject they love, they're going to read it even faster as their skill meets up with it, and they're going to get through it a whole lot better. So keep doing what you're doing and becoming intentional about what you're offering your children. So next week's live show, same time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, I will be talking about what does science of relationship mean. This is so important in a living environment where you are trying to raise self-educating children. This is the key. If you don't have this working in your homeschooling, it will not produce self-educating children. So this is a really good topic you're going to want to touch base with me on next week. And if you haven't yet already, I encourage you to search for the Charlotte Mason Mamas on Facebook and come on in and join us. I've been sharing peeks into our homeschooling from time to time. People are asking some questions for resources. It's a good opportunity for you to actually connect with other Charlotte Mason Mamas and grow with us online. Elizabeth says, the Michael York version is closer to the book than Michael Sheen's or the latest version with airships. Charlie Sheen. Oh, you're talking about the movie. Okay, I'll look for that. Okay, thank you. I'll look for that. I'm not sure which one he has picked out, but I'll check that and let him know which one is closest. But thank you. I took a little bit longer, but this is a really important topic that I want you guys to understand how Twaddle is living as well. It's all about the results of what we put in front of our children, wholesome or nonsense. And your goal always is wholesome, obviously. I'll see you next week. Until then, bye for now.